The year is 2242. For 50 years they watched us. Silent observers from the void, their colossal ships nothing more than whispers in the data streams of our deepest space probes. We called them the Silentium. We thought they were gods or perhaps ghosts. We were wrong. They were conquerors. The invasion was not a war. It was an erasure. From the orbital command station, Chimera, I saw it all. I am Commander Elias Kane. I watched as their armada, a swarm of obsidian shards that blotted out the stars, descended upon Earth. Cities I once knew, Tokyo, London, New York, vanished in blooms of silent white fire. Our fleets, our pride, were swatted aside like flies. In a single day, humanity was brought to its knees, and I was stranded, a helpless witness in a tin can orbiting my own graveyard. For 10 agonizing years, Chimera Station became my prison, my post, my tomb. All I could do was watch the planet below turn from a vibrant blue marble into a scarred gray husk, patrolled by the Silentium's brutal enforcers. Communication was dead. Hope was a currency we could no longer afford. Down on that ruined Earth, Adrian Mercer survived. He was a scavenger, a ghost haunting the skeletal remains of what was once Chicago. He lived in the shadows of shattered skyscrapers, breathing filtered air and eating whatever scraps the alien patrols missed. For Adrian, every sunrise was a miracle, every sunset a question of whether he'd see another. The Silentium weren't just occupiers. They were hunters. Their biomechanical hounds, the stalkers, roamed the desolate streets sniffing out the last pockets of human resistance. Adrian's life was a desperate, lonely marathon, running from a nightmare he could never wake up from. He'd seen friends, family, and strangers fall. He was one of the last. Then, one day, everything changed. A faint signal, a ghost in the machine, pierced through a decade of silence. It was a human distress call, weak and desperate, originating from a crashed Silentium transport on the planet's surface. On Chimera, my heart pounded against my ribs for the first time in years. A survivor. There was a survivor trapped in the belly of the beast. For Adrian, hiding in the rusted shell of a bus, the crash was a spectacle of fire and twisted metal, a rare moment of alien fallibility. He saw the same signal I did, a flicker on his salvaged datapad. A choice presented itself. Stay hidden and survive another day, or risk everything for a stranger. Against all odds, against all logic, we both acted. From orbit, I rerouted Chimera's last dregs of power, creating a localized energy surge to temporarily blind the Silentium sensors in the crash zone. It was a massive gamble. If they traced it back to me, my time was up. Down below, armed with little more than a sharpened pipe and a reckless surge of defiance, Adrian moved toward the wreckage. He dodged stalker patrols, his every step a heartbeat away from oblivion. He found the transport, pried open a mangled hatch, and there, amidst the alien machinery, was a single cryopod. Inside, a woman, her face pale and serene, was suspended in sleep. He had found humanity's last best secret. Freeing her was the spark. The moment Adrian carried her from the wreckage, it was as if a dormant switch was flipped across the planet. Small, isolated pockets of survivors, who had lived in fear for a decade, saw this act of impossible defiance through their own scavenged tech. On Chimera, I intercepted dozens of new, encrypted signals, all lighting up in the wake of the rescue. They were survivors, like Adrian, who had seen the crash, seen the rescue, and finally found a reason to fight. It wasn't a coordinated plan. It was a spontaneous primal roar of a species that refused to die. The battle for Earth had not ended. It had just begun. From my orbital throne, I started to coordinate, feeding tactical data to the nascent resistance cells. Adrian, no longer just a scavenger but a reluctant hero, guided the rescued woman through the ruins, realizing she was more than just a survivor. She was a symbol. The Silentium, so used to our silence, now faced a chorus of rebellion. They had torn our world apart, but in doing so, they had scattered the seeds of their own destruction. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and on the brink of extinction, but we were no longer silent, and we were coming for our home. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The first strike from Earth's orbital fleet shattered the quiet void of space, a sudden eruption of fire and energy against the alien armada. Lasers tore through the darkness like fingers of judgment, and massive ships convulsed in bursts of molten metal. Commander Kane's eyes were glued to the command console, hands moving with precision over controls that hummed with lethal purpose. He could see the alien vessels adjust, reorganize, but the calculated fury of Earth's fleet had already thrown them off balance. The invaders had anticipated hesitation, predictability, but humanity had none of those weaknesses left to exploit. Every human life mattered, and one life had already forced the planet to act. Down below, Adrian Mercer still crouched among the ruins of Washington, the distant bursts of light painting the night sky in a surreal palette of fire and electric blue. He had no idea the scale of what had been unleashed, no way to comprehend the orbital armada moving into position to protect him and punish his captors. All he knew was instinct, the same stubborn will to survive that had carried him this far. Every step, every heartbeat, was a careful negotiation with death. Yet even in the chaos, he felt it, the subtle hum of something powerful moving on his side, a promise of protection that he could not yet see but knew was real. The alien commanders were not blind to this change. Deep within the core of their flagship, a massive intelligence network pulsed, analyzing the sudden offensive. One of their most senior strategists, a creature with a skeletal visage and eyes that shimmered with calculated malice, observed the screens with growing unease. They are reacting differently. It is not fear. It is resolve. The words hissed through the translator circuits, strange and deliberate, a recognition of something the aliens had never truly understood. Humans were not predictable, not expendable, and certainly not weak. They had crossed a threshold no species had expected. One human had survived, and in doing so, had awakened a planet that would not forgive. Kane's voice cut through the comm lines, calm but commanding. All units, maintain formation and hold fire on non-engaged vessels. Focus on breaking their defensive lines, but avoid overextension. We hit hard, precise, and we hit for every human they've threatened. His words carried across the fleet. Crisp, urgent, an unspoken promise of vengeance that resonated with every captain in orbit. The soldiers manning their posts felt it too, the weight of duty, the surge of righteous anger. Humanity was no longer a victim. It was a predator responding to insult, a species awakened. Adrian moved cautiously through the streets, every shadow a potential enemy, every scrap of debris a shield. In the distance he glimpsed the first alien soldiers descending toward the city, sleek, predatory forms moving with terrifying precision. Yet even as fear gripped him, a spark of determination flared. He had survived once and he would survive again. Every step he took was measured, every breath controlled, his mind already racing ahead, imagining the chain of events that would lead him out alive. Somewhere above, Kane's fleet was moving, responding to his very existence, turning what should have been a death sentence into a beacon of human defiance. The first direct confrontation erupted near the city's central plaza, where the alien soldiers began a sweep, scanning for signs of life. Adrian froze behind a shattered wall, watching as one of them extended a scanning appendage toward the ground, the lights flickering across the rubble. A sudden movement, a small fireball hurled with precision, disrupted the scan. A group of humans, civilians turned fighters, had coordinated a counterstrike. Though ill-equipped and outmatched, their actions were deliberate, tactical, and deadly in their simplicity. The aliens hesitated, unaccustomed to resistance that was both intelligent and relentless. Kane's fleet was already exploiting that hesitation. Tactical strikes cut through the alien ranks, beams of concentrated energy ripping through hulls with surgical accuracy. Communications between enemy ships began to fracture under the coordinated assault, confusion spreading like wildfire. Humanity's first true counterattack had begun, ignited by a single human life that the invaders had assumed was inconsequential. Every strike was precise, every maneuver calculated, every moment a testament to the human spirit that refused to be dominated. Adrian's heart raced as he witnessed the distant flashes in the sky. He realized in a sudden clarity that he was no longer alone. Earth had noticed, and in noticing, had acted. His survival was now intertwined with the planet's response, and the weight of that responsibility settled over him like armor. Each step forward became an act of defiance. each breath a claim of humanity's indomitable will. The aliens had assumed weakness. They had underestimated what it meant to touch a human life. Back on the flagship, the alien strategists' unease grew into agitation. They are coordinated, connected in ways we did not anticipate. Their responses are instinctive yet deliberate. One human has activated a planetary reaction. Every data readout reinforced a terrifying conclusion. Humans would not simply survive. They would strike back, and the consequences would ripple across the Armada like a shockwave. Their calculations, once precise and confident, were now fractured. Humanity had awakened. As the first waves of alien soldiers were repelled from the city, and Adrian found himself momentarily hidden among the wreckage, he understood something profound. Survival was no longer about fleeing or hiding. It was about fighting, about asserting the right to live, and about igniting a force greater than himself. Above him, the orbital fleet carved a path of fire and light through the alien armada, turning fear into hope, chaos into strategy. One human had been rescued, yes, but in that rescue, an entire planet had been awakened, and a war was only beginning. The night sky burned with light and fury, the distant sounds of battle echoing like thunder across continents. Humanity's message was clear, as Kane's voice resonated through command lines and hearts alike. Touch one of ours and you awaken all of us. Adrian clenched his fists, feeling the weight of destiny settle upon him. He had survived, yes, but more than survival awaited him now. He had become the spark that would ignite a planet's wrath, and no force in the galaxy would be able to ignore it. Adrian paused atop a crumbling overpass, the acrid smoke of ruined buildings curling around him. His chest heaved, but there was no time to rest. The first wave of alien scouts had been disrupted, but more were descending from above, their movements precise and relentless. Yet, for the first time, he noticed something strange: hesitation. The alien units that had once moved with absolute certainty now scanned the streets with cautious, almost paranoid deliberation. Their strategy had faltered, and Adrian instinctively understood why. Humanity had not merely reacted, it had adapted. And adaptation, he knew in that instant, could be deadly. From orbit, Kane's fleet continued to tighten its grip. Each strike was choreographed to perfection, exploiting weaknesses in the alien formations that only humans could perceive. The Armada's massive engines flared, retreating from concentrated beams of energy that tore through their shields. Alien commanders, once confident in their supremacy, were now forced into reactive maneuvers. Their communications, once pristine and controlled, were riddled with static, their algorithms overburdened by the unpredictability of human strategy. Kane watched it unfold with grim satisfaction. The universe had assumed humans were weak. One human had proven them wrong, and now the planet itself was asserting that truth. Adrian's gaze swept across the shattered streets, searching for a path forward. His instincts guided him, every decision a balance of survival and aggression. He moved silently, each footstep calculated, aware that the aliens were watching, analyzing, and anticipating. Yet every instinct that told him he was alone was wrong. Tiny hints of interference appeared in the aliens' movements, subtle disruptions he could not yet explain. Energy pulses that deflected their scanners, minor malfunctions in their targeting systems. An unseen hand was guiding the fight, a planetary consciousness that had awakened with his survival. For the first time, he felt less like prey and more like a fulcrum, a pivot on which the balance of life and death now rested. Within the alien flagship, the strategists grew increasingly agitated. Every failed maneuver, every lost unit, widened the chasm of doubt. They are not predictable, not expendable, not weak. One human has caused imbalance, it hissed, its voice reverberating across the metallic chambers. The concept was alien, incomprehensible. For centuries they had catalogued and conquered species with predictable responses. Humanity was different. They fought not only with technology but with instinct, with a stubbornness that bordered on madness. One life had illuminated an entire species' potential for resistance, and the strategist's calculations, once flawless, now teetered on the brink of chaos. Adrian crouched behind a toppled monument, observing a small group of alien soldiers as they moved methodically toward a civilian shelter. Panic surged in his chest, but instinct and training lessons learned in brief but intense survival drills took over. Using a combination of debris, makeshift distractions, and precise timing, he managed to redirect their attention, luring them into a narrow alley. There, he struck with calculated force, using a stolen plasma cutter to disable their scanning module. 1 down, 2 to go, and he felt the first true taste of empowerment. For the first time, he realized survival was no longer passive. Survival demanded action, courage, and defiance. Above him, the orbital fleet executed its maneuvers with ruthless precision. Massive ships pivoted, energy beams lanced out to sever alien reinforcements before they could reach the city. Kane's voice crackled over comms, concise, commanding. Maintain pressure. Focus on isolation points. Cut them off, force them into choke zones. They will not overwhelm us. Every fleet captain knew their duty. Every strike a testament to humanity's refusal to be passive. The aliens had assumed ease in their conquest. They had misjudged the will of a species defending one of its own. Suddenly, a tremor of realization hit Adrian. The aliens were coordinating, but they were hesitant. The smallest human interventions, his diversions, the actions of scattered survivors had introduced enough unpredictability to slow their advance. Even the orbital strikes were timed not only by Kane's command, but seemingly in response to his own movements. The thought struck him like a jolt. He was not merely surviving. He was directing the response of an entire planet. Each act, each decision resonated far beyond his immediate perception. One human, one life had altered the course of planetary strategy. As the night deepened, the conflict escalated. Alien patrols were repelled. Small pockets of resistance gained ground, and the city, though scarred and battered, held. Adrian moved carefully, but there was a fire within him now, a determination that transcended fear. Humanity had awakened, and he could feel it in every strike, every pulse of energy above, every subtle disruption in the alien ranks. The Armada had not just underestimated him, they had underestimated all of them. Kane, watching from orbit, allowed a rare moment of reflection. The fleet was performing flawlessly, but more than that, the human spirit was manifesting in ways no algorithm could predict. One life had become the spark. A planet had become the flame. Adrian's defiance, his instinctive resistance, had awakened a force that could not be measured, calculated, or ignored. Humanity was no longer waiting to be conquered. Humanity was acting. As dawn approached, the city lay in partial ruin, but the invaders' advance had stalled. Adrian, crouched amid the rubble, realized something profound. He was not alone, not just because of the fleet, but because survival had awakened something far greater. The aliens had assumed weakness. They were learning, slowly, that to touch a human life was to awaken the wrath of an entire species. And tonight, that wrath had begun. In the scarred ruins of what was once a bustling city, a ghost moved through the shadows. His name was Adrian Mercer, and he was the planet's silent vengeance. He wasn't a soldier, not in the traditional sense. He was a data analyst, a man who saw the world in patterns. And now, he saw the patterns of the invaders, the alien scourge that had shattered his world. Their patrols, their supply lines, their communication relays to Adrian, it was all just code to be broken. He moved with a ghost's grace, a whisper in the concrete canyons. Every step was calculated. He knew their patrol routes down to the second, their sensor blind spots down to the centimeter. He was a phantom they couldn't catch, a disruption they couldn't predict. While the aliens methodically dismantled humanity's defenses, Adrian dismantled theirs from the inside out, piece by painful piece. He'd sabotage a fuel depot here, misdirect a scout drone there. Small acts of defiance that, when added together, began to sow chaos in their perfect, orderly invasion. High above, in the cold vacuum of space, the remnants of the orbital fleet watched and waited. Commander Kane, a man whose face was etched with the grim reality of a losing war, tracked Adrian's movements. He wasn't just watching a lone survivor. He was watching a signal, a beacon of hope. Adrian was the ground truth, the eyes and ears they had lost. His disruptions were the openings Kane desperately needed. When Adrian took out a sensor grid, Kane would order a precision strike on the now blinded enemy position. When Adrian diverted a supply convoy, Kane's ships would descend like hawks on the vulnerable transport. It was a deadly dance between the man on the ground and the fleet in the sky. Adrian's legend began to spread. Whispers passed through the hidden bunkers and shattered subway tunnels where other survivors huddled. They called him the Ghost of Sector Gamma. His actions, amplified by the orbital fleet's thunderous retribution, sparked something that the aliens had tried so hard to extinguish: hope. People who had been hiding for weeks, surviving on scraps, began to see a chance, a sliver of light in the suffocating darkness. They started to fight back. A trapped mechanic might rig an old mining laser. A group of students might create a makeshift EMP. They were small, scattered, but they were no longer just victims. They were a resistance. Adrian had not just fought the enemy. He had reignited the human spirit. Aboard the alien command ship, the strategist watched its tactical displays with growing unease. For cycles, the invasion of this world had proceeded with textbook efficiency. The natives were technologically inferior, their military structures predictable. But now anomalies were appearing. Spontaneous, uncoordinated attacks that defied all logic and predictive models. One moment, a patrol would vanish. The next, a critical logistics hub would go dark. It was like fighting a swarm of insects, each with its own mind, unpredictable and infuriatingly adaptive. This wasn't the organized retreat and surrender they had anticipated. This was something new. This was chaos. And at the heart of it all, the strategist sensed a single, guiding intelligence, a mind that understood their patterns as well as they did. Adrian's next target was his most ambitious yet, the primary communications relay tower for the entire sector. It was a monstrous structure, crackling with alien energy, the nerve center that coordinated the ground assault. Getting to it was a suicide mission. The area was swarming with the invaders' elite guards. But Adrian had spent days studying their shifts, their blind spots, the subtle hum of the tower's power conduits. He knew there was a 2-minute window during the power cycle recalibration when the perimeter defenses would be at their weakest. 2 minutes to change the course of the war. He moved like smoke, evading patrols that passed meters away. He climbed the lattice of the tower, the alien metal cold and foreign beneath his fingers. He reached the primary node, a pulsating orb of light, and attached the charges. As he slid back into the shadows, the timer on his detonator ticked down. The explosion was not massive, but it was precise. The orb flickered, sputtered, and died. Across the entire sector, the alien network went silent. Drones fell from the sky. Ground troops froze, their connection to the hive mind severed. Their advance, so relentless and powerful moments before, faltered into confusion. High above, Kane saw the network go dark. "All ships!" His voice boomed across the fleet's comms. "That's our signal. This is the moment we've been waiting for. Target their command concentrations. Fire at will." The orbital fleet, a wounded but still dangerous beast, unleashed its full fury. Lances of pure energy rained down from the heavens, striking the now deaf and blind alien forces with devastating accuracy. Formations that had been steamrolling through human defenses were now caught in the open, disorganized and helpless. The ground shook with the force of humanity's counterattack. Watching from a ruined skyscraper, Adrian saw the sky light up with the fire of the fleet. He saw the alien advance crumble. A grim smile touched his lips. This was it. This was the turning point. It wasn't victory, not yet. But it was a beginning. It was the moment humanity stopped running and started fighting back on its own terms. He was just one man, but he had given his species a chance to deliver its reckoning. The alien strategist stared at the tactical map, now a sea of red alerts and severed connections. Contempt had turned to shock, and shock was now hardening into a cold, unfamiliar emotion: respect. Maybe even a flicker of fear. They had classified the humans as a minor, non-strategic species. They had analyzed their technology, their biology, their history of internal conflict, and had judged them weak. They had made a fatal error. They had not accounted for the unpredictable, unbreakable spirit that could allow one individual to defy an empire, to inspire a fallen world to rise from its own ashes. The battle for this planet was far from over, but the strategist now understood a terrifying truth. Humanity's war for survival had just begun. The sun had climbed high over the shattered skyline, casting long shadows across streets scarred by fire and metal. Adrian Mercer paused atop a ruined overpass, the acrid tang of smoke and ozone filling the air. The distant hum of orbital engines reverberated like a drumbeat in his chest, reminding him that the fight was no longer confined to the streets below. Above, Earth's fleet moved with lethal precision, each ship a calculated instrument of vengeance. The alien armada, once invincible in its arrogance, now felt the weight of a species awakened. One human had survived, and that survival had unleashed fury the galaxy had never anticipated. Adrian darted across the rubble-strewn streets, weaving through shattered vehicles and collapsed buildings. His pulse raced, but fear no longer dictated his movements. Each step was calculated, each breath deliberate, as he observed the alien units attempting to reorganize their patrols. But the humans on the ground were no longer scattered survivors. They were an army in miniature, improvising, coordinating, and resisting with intelligence and courage. Every human defiance disrupted the alien formations, forcing recalculations that widened gaps in their lines. Adrian had become the linchpin of a planetary strategy he did not fully understand, yet the effects were undeniable. Above the city, Kane's fleet executed a sequence of maneuvers that would have seemed impossible just hours before. Energy beams lanced through the void, striking alien vessels with pinpoint accuracy. The alien commanders, their confidence eroded, scrambled to repair shields and redirect reinforcements, but each adjustment came too late. Humanity's strikes, informed by instinct, improvisation, and an unyielding will to protect one of its own, had introduced chaos into the previously ordered armada. One human had changed the battle, and every soldier under Kane's command understood that they were no longer fighting in isolation. They were fighting as a single, coordinated organism, with Adrian as their inadvertent guide. The aliens, sensing the threat, intensified their assault on the city. Massive dropships descended, disgorging squads of skeletal predatory warriors onto the streets. Adrian ducked behind a shattered concrete pillar as a volley of plasma rounds streaked past him. He had grown accustomed to the fear, to the constant tension, but the stakes had escalated. Now, every move could determine not only his survival, but the trajectory of the entire planetary response. He activated a small makeshift EMP device, disabling one of the dropship's scanning drones. Sparks rained down as the alien units faltered, giving him the opening he needed to move. Kane's voice crackled across comms, calm but resolute. "Focus on the flanks. Exploit every disruption." They assumed our hesitation, but hesitation is not in our nature. They underestimated humanity, and we will correct that mistake. The fleet responded instantly, pivoting to target weak points created by Adrian's improvised interference. Explosions bloomed across the alien formation like celestial firework displays, lighting the void with streaks of blue and crimson. Alien vessels convulsed as energy beams tore through shields, forcing sudden retreats and exposing previously hidden units. Humanity's calculated fury had begun to ripple across the galaxy, proving that one life could ignite an entire species into action. On the ground, Adrian pressed forward, navigating a gauntlet of fire and debris. Each step was a defiance of inevitability, a declaration that humanity would not submit. Alien patrols closed in, but humans had adapted. Improvised barricades, synchronized ambush, and guerrilla tactics disrupted enemy cohesion. Adrian's mind raced, calculating angles, predicting movements, and exploiting every hesitation. Every small act of defiance was magnified by the orbital fleet above, each strike coordinated by instinct and intent, feeding into a feedback loop of escalating resistance. Within the alien flagship, the skeletal strategist's agitation reached a crescendo. "They are unpredictable. One human has catalyzed planetary retaliation. Resistance is coordinated. Unstoppable." The words were hissed, fragmented, a reflection of the chaos now dominating its calculations. Every maneuver, every strike, every adaptive action on the human side was a challenge to the alien centuries of assumed superiority. The strategist had underestimated the cumulative power of human instinct, ingenuity, and the unbreakable bond that had been awakened by one rescued life. As Adrian reached the edge of the city's central plaza, The battle around him reached a fever pitch. Explosions shook the ground, alien units fell in scattered clusters, and the humans fighting alongside him pressed forward with renewed determination. For the first time, Adrian felt the true scope of his influence. Each diversion, each improvisation, each act of courage on the streets below, synchronized with the fleet above. Humanity had become a single cohesive force, driven by instinct, empathy, and the refusal to allow one life to be extinguished. The sun glinted off the shattered armor of alien units as they faltered under coordinated strikes. Adrian paused, chest heaving as he looked up at the sky. The orbital fleet moved with lethal precision, energy beams cutting through enemy ranks, while humans on the ground disrupted and redirected their movements. One human had been rescued, yes, but that single act had become the catalyst for a planetary awakening. Adrian's resolve hardened. This was no longer about mere survival. It was about defiance, about proving that humanity would not be subdued, about showing the galaxy that touching one human life could awaken the wrath of a planet. And in that moment, as alien ships faltered and human determination surged, Adrian understood a truth that would shape the coming hours. Survival was not enough. One human had sparked the war, but the fight was now bigger than himself. Humanity had awakened, and the universe would never underestimate it again. The skyline, once a symbol of ordinary life, had become a battlefield carved in fire and shadow. Adrian Mercer crouched behind the remains of a collapsed government building, breathing hard, ears ringing from the concussive bursts above. The city was scarred beyond recognition, yet every moment of destruction had been met with defiance. The alien armada, though battered, was adapting. From orbit, Kane's fleet detected subtle shifts in formation patterns, signals of a counter-strategy that chilled the blood even of seasoned commanders. Humanity had struck first, yes, but the aliens were learning and learning quickly. Adrian peered around the jagged edge of the rubble, noting the movements of a small alien strike team advancing toward a cluster of trapped survivors. Their armor shimmered with a faint adaptive glow, and their weapons emitted low, pulsating hums as if resonating with each human heartbeat. He understood instantly. These units had been modified in response to the chaos his survival had caused. Every improvisation, every tactical move by humans, had forced a recalibration in alien strategy. Survival had become a battle of wits, instincts, and courage, not just raw firepower. With a surge of adrenaline, Adrian vaulted over debris, intercepting the alien advance. The first strike was swift, a blur of motion, a flash of steel against alien armor, and the enemy staggered. But he realized immediately that these units were no longer the predictable scouts he had encountered before. They adapted mid-engagement, analyzing his movements, countering his attacks with uncanny speed. A plasma blade cut dangerously close, sparks flying as it clashed with the makeshift weapon he had crafted. His heart pounded, awareness sharpened to an almost painful degree. This was no longer just survival. This was a test of instinct and resolve. High above, Kane coordinated with surgical precision. Deploy auxiliary drones to support ground teams. Focus on sectors showing increased alien adaptation. We anticipate their countermeasures and we adjust accordingly. The fleet's energy beams now carved not just destruction but guidance, subtly shaping the battlefield to aid human survival. Every move Adrian made seemed to echo in Kane's calculations, creating an invisible synergy between one human life and a planetary response. The alien armada, despite its technological might, could not fully anticipate the combination of instinct, courage, and planetary-scale support that now worked in perfect harmony. Adrian ducked into a narrow alley, the air thick with smoke and sparks from overhead strikes. The alien units paused momentarily, scanning for anomalies, then continued forward with chilling precision. But he was ready. A carefully timed detonation from a rigged supply cache sent shock waves through their formation, staggering them just enough for Adrian to sprint toward a group of civilians trapped near the city's edge. Each act, each decision carried weight far beyond himself. Survival had become strategy. Improvisation had become leadership. He realized with a grim satisfaction that one life could indeed shape the fate of many. Inside the alien flagship, the skeletal strategists seethed with frustration. They are coordinated, instinctive, resilient, One human has become a planetary vector. Each action multiplies resistance. Impossible to predict. Unacceptable. The alien calculations, once absolute, now faltered under the pressure of adaptive human tactics amplified by Kane's fleet. The strategists recognized for the first time the terrifying truth of human unpredictability. They did not merely respond to threats, they transformed them into opportunities. One human life had catalyzed a planetary reaction that no algorithm could contain. Adrian reached the trapped civilians just as another alien strike team rounded the corner. His movements were fluid, almost instinctual. He guided the civilians toward a safe corridor between crumbling buildings, using every shadow, every debris pile, every improvised barrier as cover. The aliens adapted, but humanity's determination was relentless. The orbital fleet provided micro-strikes to cut off the advancing units, and Adrian, unaware of the full scope, felt an almost spiritual connection to the larger fight. Every heartbeat, every breath was synchronized with the planet's vengeance. Kane monitored the unfolding events with a mix of awe and calculation. Focus on Sector 7 Delta. Ground units require immediate support. Precision strikes only do not destroy civilian infrastructure. Use their adaptive behavior against them. The fleet responded instantaneously. Energy beams slicing paths through the alien formation, severing reinforcements and creating openings for Adrian and others on the ground. Humanity's counteroffensive had become a symphony of instinct, strategy, and planetary coordination, a force amplified by one man's survival and courage. As Adrian led the civilians toward relative safety, he realized the magnitude of what had been unleashed. The aliens were no longer merely invaders, they were students of human resilience, forced to confront a species that refused to be dominated. Each improvisation, each act of bravery, each coordinated strike had disrupted the alien strategy, creating a cascade of consequences that spread from the ruined streets to orbit and beyond. He understood finally that survival was not enough. Defiance, courage, and action were the catalyst for planetary-scale retaliation. One human life had become the spark that ignited the fury of an entire world. The city burned, yet hope surged in every heartbeat of those who survived. Adrian paused for a moment, catching his breath, aware of the distant roar of orbital strikes and the subtle flicker of alien adaptation above. Humanity had taken the first steps into a new chapter, one defined not by fear, but by unyielding resolve. The aliens had learned a lesson they would never forget. To touch one human life was to awaken the wrath of a planet, a force that would not rest until every threat was confronted. Adrian's eyes hardened with determination. The fight was far from over, but the first victory, born of instinct, courage, and planetary solidarity, had been won. The sky above the city was a shattered canvas of smoke, fire, and glinting metal. Adrian Mercer crouched atop a fractured rooftop, surveying the battlefield with a grim focus. The alien forces had regrouped, their adaptive strategies becoming more sophisticated. Yet hesitation lingered in their movements, a subtle acknowledgement that humanity was no longer a species to underestimate. Every beam of light from Kane's orbital fleet struck with surgical precision, amplifying the chaos below. Each strike on the alien formation resonated across the city streets, creating fleeting opportunities that Adrian instinctively seized. One human had survived, yes, but that single act had awakened a planetary reckoning that refused to be contained. A sudden tremor shook the rooftop as a distant explosion tore through the alien dropships. The air vibrated with kinetic energy, and Adrian instinctively flattened against the concrete. His heart raced not with fear, but with an intense awareness of purpose. Every pulse in the city, every sound of destruction, was proof that the fight was no longer localized. It was planetary. The aliens had assumed dominance, yet here they were, faltering in the face of defiance born from instinct, courage, and one human life that had become the axis of retaliation. Adrian's attention snapped to a group of advancing alien soldiers moving toward a civilian shelter. Their armor shimmered with adaptive energy, reflecting the bursts of light from the orbital strikes above. He had learned their patterns, their moments of hesitation, their predictive instincts, and he exploited them without hesitation. Tossing a makeshift EMP device, he disabled their scanning systems, forcing them to pause. Sparks cascaded across the street as the alien unit staggered, just long enough for Adrian to sprint into the shelter and guide the civilians toward a safer corridor. Every act of survival was now an act of defiance, a challenge to the alien assumption that humanity could be subdued. From orbit, Kane observed the alien flagship through a series of sensor feeds. Its massive hull loomed in the void, colossal and imposing, yet every strike from the fleet chipped away at its defenses. "Targeting critical nodes on the flagship," Kane ordered. "Focus on disabling propulsion and communications. We need them isolated. Every unit in the city depends on it." Energy beams lanced through space, slashing through alien reinforcements with precision. The flagship convulsed as shields flared and failed, its occupants scrambling to maintain cohesion. The skeletal strategist within hissed with alarm, every calculation unraveling under the combined force of planetary coordination and instinctive human interference. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him, not just for those in his immediate care, but for the entire planetary effort now intertwined with his own actions. Every diversion, every tactical choice, every burst of courage influenced the strikes above. He realized with stark clarity that he was no longer merely surviving. He was the fulcrum upon which the battle teetered, the central pivot connecting human instinct to planetary-scale strategy. One human life had catalyzed a response that spanned orbit and city streets alike. Inside the alien flagship, frustration boiled into desperation. The catalyst. It is guiding them, destabilizing formations. Impossible to contain. The strategist's voice was a hiss of disbelief, fragmented and tremulous. Centuries of conquering intelligent species had never produced such unpredictable behavior. Humans adapted, they improvised, they fought with a stubbornness that transcended fear. One human life, seemingly insignificant in isolation, had become the linchpin of planetary retaliation. Every maneuver by Adrian amplified the chaos. Every act of defiance destabilized the armada. The realization gnawed at the alien command. They had underestimated humanity, and now the consequences were irreversible. Adrian paused atop another ruined building, peering through the smoke toward the flagship. Its silhouette was dark and jagged, but the coordinated strikes from Kane's fleet had weakened its structure. He understood instinctively that this was the moment to act decisively. The orbital strikes had created openings, and the alien units on the streets were reacting to disruptions he had orchestrated, knowingly or unknowingly. Each step he took was no longer just for survival, it was a calculated push against the forces that had thought themselves superior. Humanity was fighting back, and he was the spark that had ignited it. The civilians he led glanced at him with fear and trust, sensing the determination radiating from his movements. He guided them toward a subterranean passage, leading them away from the main conflict while simultaneously drawing alien patrols into traps he could anticipate. Each step, each diversion, each improvisation strengthened the planetary response above. Kane's fleet adjusted strikes based on the ripple effects of Adrian's movements, slicing through the alien lines with unrelenting precision. One human had survived and, in doing so, had become the center of a planetary counteroffensive that no force could fully anticipate. As the flagship convulsed under concentrated strikes, Adrian looked up at the sky, feeling the invisible link between his survival and the orchestration of planetary vengeance. Humanity was awake. One life had sparked a war, yes, but that war had grown into a declaration of defiance that would not be ignored. The aliens had assumed dominance, yet here they faltered, realizing that touching a human life was no longer just an act, it was a provocation, a challenge to an entire species' wrath. Adrian's fists clenched, eyes narrowing with resolve. The fight had escalated, the turning point had arrived, and the full force of human resilience was about to be unleashed. The city below was a storm of fire and motion, smoke curling in black plumes toward the sky as energy beams lanced across the horizon. Adrian Mercer sprinted along a shattered avenue, his senses sharpened to every detail, the flicker of alien sensors, the heat of plasma strikes, the distant rumble of orbital bombardments. Every movement, every decision, carried consequences beyond his comprehension. The humans scattered throughout the city were no longer merely survivors. They were insurgents, improvising, coordinating, and striking with lethal determination. One human had survived. Yes, but his survival had become the catalyst for a planetary onslaught that the aliens could neither predict nor counter. From orbit, Kane's fleet executed a coordinated series of strikes that illuminated the void like celestial fire. Concentrated beams tore through alien cruisers, severing propulsion lines and dismantling shields in cascading explosions. Each strike was informed not only by human intelligence, but by the subtle improvisations of Adrian and others on the ground. Every diversion, every act of courage, every tactical disruption on the streets rippled upward into orbital strategy. Humanity had become a singular, cohesive force, a planetary organism united by instinct, courage, and the unbreakable will to protect its own. Adrian ducked behind the remains of a collapsed skyscraper as a volley of plasma bolts screamed overhead. The aliens were adapting, their units now moving with eerie synchronicity, scanning in patterns that suggested learning from prior failures. But the humans on the ground were just as adaptive. Guerrilla tactics, improvisation, and instinctive strategy slowed the alien advance, turning their own precision against them. Adrian spotted a group of trapped civilians and dove forward, using his body and improvised barriers to shield them. Sparks erupted as a stray plasma shot clipped the concrete pillar beside him, but his focus never wavered. Survival had transformed into defiance, defiance into strategy, and strategy into planetary-scale influence. Within the alien flagship, the skeletal strategist's frustration boiled over. They are unrelenting. One human has triggered a cascade, planetary coordination. Impossible to contain. The words hissed across the metallic chambers, fractured and chaotic. Every strike, every improvisation, every act of courage by humans disrupted centuries of carefully calculated dominance. The aliens had assumed humanity would be subservient, expendable, predictable. They had been wrong. One human had survived, and in doing so, had sparked the wrath of a species unwilling to accept weakness or death. Adrian moved through the streets with precision, leading civilians towards safer zones while simultaneously exploiting weaknesses in alien formations. Each diversion caused a ripple effect, disrupting the enemy's patrols and creating openings for Kane's fleet to strike from orbit. Explosions erupted in the distance, lighting the ruins in shades of crimson and blue. Alien dropships convulsed as orbital beams severed engines and tore open hulls, cascading destruction in a pattern that seemed almost choreographed, yet was born from instinct, improvisation, and the unyielding determination of one human life amplified across a planet. The ground quaked beneath Adrian as a massive alien walker advanced toward the city center, its armor pulsing with adaptive energy. Fear would have paralyzed another man, but Adrian felt only determination. He analyzed the walker's patterns, predicted its steps, and led it into a narrow intersection. There, the combined strikes from the orbital fleet and the improvised traps on the streets converged. The walker convulsed, sparks and fire cascading across its hull, then collapsed in a thunderous explosion that shook the surrounding ruins. Humans nearby erupted in a mixture of awe and defiance. One life, one act of courage had shaped the battlefield itself. Kane watched the battlefield unfold from orbit, every strike and maneuver reflecting the growing synergy between human instinct and planetary strategy. All units focus on central command clusters, exploit weaknesses revealed by ground teams. Do not underestimate them, they are adaptive, persistent, and relentless. The fleet responded instantly, cutting a swath through alien ranks while minimizing civilian casualties. The aliens, despite their technological superiority, were faltering. The combination of human improvisation, courage, and planetary coordination was proving to be a force no algorithm could predict. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the city, Adrian paused to catch his breath. Around him, humans rallied, their faces streaked with sweat, blood, and soot, yet shining with defiance. They had learned to adapt, to fight, to survive, and to influence the planetary-scale battle above. One human had survived, yes, but that survival had sparked a war born of instinct, courage, and collective resolve. Humanity was no longer reactive. Humanity was a force awakened, a planet asserting its will, and Adrian was at the very heart of it. The alien strategist recoiled as it watched the flagship convulse under the relentless strikes. One human has become many. One planet has awakened. We miscalculated. Its words faltered as the realization sank in. Humanity was not just surviving. It was retaliating with precision, coordination, and unyielding will. The war had shifted irrevocably. The first planetary-scale victory was within reach, and Adrian, crouched amid the ruins, felt the weight of destiny settle firmly upon him. The fight was far from over, but the tide had turned. Humanity had awakened. The alien flagship loomed over the city like a dark god, its jagged silhouette blotting out the sun. Adrian Mercer crouched atop a shattered skyscraper, sweat streaking his face, lungs burning as he surveyed the battlefield. The streets below were a chaotic symphony of fire, smoke, and desperation, yet humanity's defiance shone through every explosion, every improvised barricade, every pulse of energy from the orbital fleet above. A massive dropship descended from the flagship, disgorging armored alien units that moved with terrifying precision. Adrian's pulse spiked. This was no ordinary squad. They were enhanced, faster, smarter. They moved as a single organism, their coordination flawless, their intent deadly. Yet Adrian sensed an undercurrent of hesitation. He had to exploit it. He darted forward, weaving through rubble and debris. He lured the alien squad toward a narrow alley lined with twisted metal and shattered vehicles, improvising traps as he went. Sparks and fire cascaded across the street as the first explosions erupted, the aliens faltering just long enough for Adrian to slip past and reach a group of trapped civilians. Kane's voice crackled across comms. Focus all orbital strikes on the flagship's main systems. Target energy conduits, communications arrays, and propulsion units. The fleet responded instantly, energy beams lancing through the void, slashing through alien reinforcements. Explosions rocked the flagship, forcing its occupants into reactive maneuvers. Adrian pressed forward, guiding civilians toward a safer corridor. When a new threat emerged, a towering alien combat unit, its armor pulsating with adaptive energy. Its glowing eyes fixed on him with unnatural intelligence. Fear would have frozen another man, but Adrian felt only determination. Using every scrap of debris, every shadow, every tactical instinct, he lured the towering unit into a narrow intersection where the fleet's beams and his improvised traps converged. The alien unit convulsed, sparks cascading across its hull, before collapsing in a thunderous explosion. Humans nearby cheered, their defiance mirrored in every pulse of the city. Inside the flagship, the skeletal strategist's panic had escalated into desperation. Impossible, one human has destabilized all systems. Planetary coordination, overwhelming, recalibrate. Its voice hissed in frustration. The aliens had miscalculated. Humanity was not a species to conquer, it was a force. Adrian sprinted toward the base of the alien flagship, the orbital beams cutting swaths of destruction across its hull. Dropships convulsed and crashed into the city, alien soldiers faltered, and the air was filled with the roar of collapsing structures. The ground beneath him trembled as energy from above and below converged. He reached the plaza at the base of the flagship, just as Kane's fleet delivered a concentrated strike to the vessel's core systems. The flagship shuddered violently, alarms blaring through the air as the alien commands scrambled. Sparks rained down like meteor showers, twisting metal and fire engulfing the streets. As the flagship convulsed under relentless strikes, Adrian raised his eyes toward the sky, feeling the invisible connection between his life and the orchestration of planetary vengeance. The aliens had assumed dominance, yet here they faltered. Adrian's fists clenched, eyes burning with resolve. The fight had reached its climax, and the full force of human resilience was about to deliver the final judgment. The dust of a shattered world was Adrian's only companion. For 5 long years he was a ghost, the last human on a planet scoured by the alien Vix. He survived in the ruins of cities that once scraped the sky, a lone spark of defiance in an empire of ash. The Vex, arrogant in their victory, had left a skeleton crew, their colossal ships dotting the sky like malevolent moons, confident that humanity was extinguished. But they had made one critical miscalculation. They had left Adrian. His existence was a quiet rebellion. He learned their patrol routes, memorized their communication frequencies, and studied their technology from the wreckage they left behind. He discovered their greatest strength was also their greatest weakness, a centralized network. Every drone, every ship, every soldier was linked to the flagship, the Ophidian, commanded by a strategist known only as the Weaver. If the head was severed, the body would fall. Adrian's plan was insane, born of grief and fueled by a desperate hope. He found an old deep space military comms tower, a relic from a forgotten war, miraculously intact. It was a long shot, a message in a bottle cast into the void. He spent months repairing it, cannibalizing parts from Veek's machinery. Finally, one night, under a sky swarming with alien constellations, he flipped a switch. A single encrypted signal pulsed into the darkness, carrying a simple, powerful message. One is still alive. Avenge us. The signal traveled for months, a whisper across the galaxy, until it reached the Aegis, the flagship of humanity's last fleet, hidden in a remote nebula. Commander Cat, a man hardened by a decade of retreats and losses, saw the message, one survivor, on their homeworld. It was more than a distress call, it was a spark. For years they had fought a losing war, scattered and demoralized. But this message from the very heart of their fallen civilization changed everything. It was a call to arms that resonated in the soul of every soldier. Kane rallied the remnants of humanity's forces. "We have been fighting to survive," he broadcasted to the fleet. "Today we fight to win. We are going home." The scattered fleets, once hiding in fear, converged. They modified their tactics based on the intel Adrian had been secretly transmitting. Veek's weaknesses, patrol gaps, and network vulnerabilities. The counterattack, codenamed Operation Phoenix, was born. When the human fleet appeared in orbit, the Vex were caught completely off guard. Their arrogance had blinded them. The Weaver on the Ophidian watched in disbelief as dozens of human ships they believed were long destroyed, swarmed its defenses. But Kane wasn't just throwing ships at the enemy. He was conducting an orchestra of vengeance. Guided by Adrian's real-time data from the ground, smaller, faster ships darted through the Vex formations, striking at critical network relays, creating chaos in their perfectly ordered system. On the planet's surface, Adrian watched the sky burn. He had become the fleet's eyes and ears, directing fire, pointing out structural weak points on the landing ships, turning the Vix's own network against them. The Vix command was in disarray. Their drones fired erratically, their ships collided, their perfect strategy unraveling under the fury of a species they had written off. The Aegis, Kane's flagship, broke through the chaos and set a direct course for the Ophidian. The alien Weaver, a being of pure logic, couldn't comprehend the ferocity, the sheer coordinated rage of the humans. It was illogical. It was impossible. As the Aegis unleashed its final, devastating volley, the last thing the Weaver registered was a single, powerful energy signature from the planet's surface, the old comms tower overloading to send one last surge of targeting data. The Ophidian exploded in a silent, brilliant flash, its light momentarily turning night into day. Across the planet and across the system, the Vex network went dark. Leaderless and blind, their forces fell into disarray and were systematically dismantled. Humanity had won. They had taken back their home. In the aftermath, as soldiers landed on their scarred but liberated world, they found a lone figure standing atop a ruined tower, silhouetted against the dawn. He was no longer just Adrian, the last survivor. He was the spark that had reignited the flame of humanity. He was the ghost who had reminded the galaxy that even when faced with total annihilation, a single human, armed with hope and defiance, could change the course of history. He was a living monument to their resilience, their victory, and their unbreakable spirit. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to follow for more.